Impact Interview is sponsored by the Pocono Mountains, where small-town charm meets big adventures. Book your trip today by visiting PoconoMountains.com.
Well, welcome back to Nittany Game Week. This week's Impact Interview guest is the voice of college football, Chris Fowler. He's on the call again for all the big games on ESPN, and that includes the national championship coming up on Monday night. When I talk to people about this program, I always talk about the championship fight that they have. I mean, they give so much effort. They got a lot of talent, championship talent, but not the championship execution. Give us an understanding of what you saw in their playoff performance, what you liked, and maybe why they came up a little bit short against the Fighting Irish.
Well, you said it. The margin for error is obviously super slim. You make a play at the end or you don't. Notre Dame has done a great job at making those plays all season long, especially the clutch takeaways. That's what they've lived by. And unfortunately, Penn State and the quarterback cooperated with that late in the game. I would have liked to see what had happened goes to overtime, because I think Penn State showed a lot in their first two playoff games, showed a lot really all season long. I think they were built for the run too. And the margin between them and Notre Dame was really very, very slim. So, again, you see these games that come down to a play or two, and the victories, you get to write the history when you make those plays, and Notre Dame did, and it's gut wrenching for Penn State to fall short, but I think they accomplished a lot this year, and hopefully silenced some of the critics and some of the nonsense the way they played in some big games.
So obviously, Chris, nothing is ever perfect in its first year. So now that we've seen what the 12-team playoff looks like and it's been executed, what are some things you think they really got right, and maybe some things that you'd like to see them tweak?
I like the bigger field. It made for a very exciting stretch run. I like the fact that teams have a chance at redemption, Jay. That's something we've never really seen before in this sport. None of the teams really that made the semifinals would have been there in any other year of the format. Any other, including the 14 playoff, and certainly not back in the BCS and the dark ages. So I like that. I like that you can schedule tough. You can have a low point. You can bounce back, and you can write a redemption story, which Ohio State's obviously trying to do off the depths of a dismal loss to Michigan. Notre Dame's loss came super early, highly embarrassing, but not fatal. I like that. I think that I have a problem with the conference champions getting the automatic seeds just by virtue of winning, in this case, the Mountain West and the Big 12. I think there's a lot of support to fix that or change that anyway. I think they should get in the field, but like basketball, shouldn't be guaranteed one of the top four seeds. I'd be in favor, and a lot of people have said this, rank them 1 through 12, seed them that way, and set the matchups, and you don't get the automatic. But we saw that the buys didn't really mean much. The teams that won conference championships that had the bye went 0 for 4. And the teams that are playing now are all had to win 3 playoff games. So some people are fatigued. Some people, I've heard from fans, this is so long. It just doesn't end. You knew there was going to be that reaction because it's new, and everything that's new, all reforms, if you want to call it that, have unintended consequences, as you know, in the world, not just in sports. So we're living with some of the unintended consequences. But to me, what's been okay so far, Jay, is that the inevitable wear and tear that I worried a lot about, guys getting banged up and injured in game 14, 15, in some cases 16, hasn't been quite as dramatic as I thought it could be. And you don't want these playoff runs to be wars of attrition where the last team standing with enough healthy offensive linemen is the one that wins. And knockwood, so far, I have not seen as many serious injuries in this playoff. A lot of teams come in banged up. It's still a huge test of the training staff, the rehab ability, the discipline of the players, and the programs that built from the start, from the end of last season, built. Maybe if not, then before that, built for this long playoff run, I think it had success. Texas and Ohio State and Notre Dame, I think, to some degree, began planning for a 16, if necessary, 17-game schedule.
Chris, if they adjust the seeding as you suggest, and I think a lot of people would like, this unlikely we would ever see a 7 versus 8 seed again in the championship game, but that's what we got. What's your early outlook on the Buckeyes versus the Irish? And for you personally, when you get ready to call a championship game, do you feel that adrenaline pumping for yourself? And how's your preparation? Is any different for a championship game than you would for any other call?
A good question. first of all, I would throw the seedings out. I mean, the seedings mean nothing, and the seedings haven't meant anything for Ohio State since they got in the bracket. They've been favored to win these games despite being the lower seed, and that's again the case. The preparation is fun. I think that it was weird for us not to see the Big Ten. I mean, Jay knows that. We've talked about that. To be sort of excluded from watching any Ohio State, Penn State regular season games was weird. So it made preparation really challenging. We know Ohio State's program. We've covered some of those players in the past, but when we did the first round game against Tennessee, it really meant watching a lot of tape and having a lot of conversations and devouring as much as we could in the way of data and analytics and seeing practices. So it was different this year. We usually go to a playoff having seen the teams before in person, and we didn't this year. And the challenge for us is we saw Notre Dame way back in September in their opening game at A&M and haven't seen them since. I did go to a practice down here in Miami the week of the Penn State game just to kind of connect. I was trying to get to a Penn State practice, but they were just at the same time in different parts of town. So I had to make a pick, one or the other. I didn't make the wrong pick, I guess. But no, I think that it was cool to reconnect with them. I have a ton of work to do. I'm actually watching the Orange Bowl, and I'll go back and watch all Notre Dame's playoff games. I'll watch the Northern Illinois game early in the season, excuse me, to see what went wrong. So I love the preparation part, man. I love diving into the analytics and the data and watching the tape and having conversations with the players, which we'll get to do when we get to Atlanta. So yeah, you have to love the grind. You can't just love the 4 hours in the booth when you do this, right? I mean, it's just you can't hate practice and then love playing the game, right, Jay? So to do this job, you got to love the preparation, and I do.
Okay, one last question for you, and this is a fun one, a little offbeat, so just hang with me here. So the computers have taken over the world, and it's all AI, okay? And now you're not allowed to call the game on Monday. What, not living, but past AI person would you want to call the game and listen to call the game as the play-by-play? And now the computers have allowed you to stay in the booth, but who would you have next to you? And I'll even let you have a two-person booth if you want, two analysts. Who would you want next to you in AI doing the game on Monday night?
Oh, these are hard questions, man. They are a
but
curveball.
it's fun. It's fun. We're having some fun with it.
I was supposed to say, get Herb Street out of there. Let's get some AI creation in there.
If the computers have taken over, or his flight gets delayed and they got to call up an AI.
I mean, it probably will take over at some point. I mean, they could do some crazy stuff with it. People wonder if we did the voice of the EA Sports game. People wonder why didn't they just use AI? That's probably coming. They're not quite there yet with some of the stuff. I'd like to believe AI could not call a game to the same level we can. Maybe they will soon. That'll be pretty scary. But you know what? If that happens, man, I'll sit back and watch. And life is good, and it's been a good long run. So if computers end up taking over and they want to do it better than us, and people think they can, I'm good with stepping aside. I mean, who would I want to step in and call the game? I mean, I grew up listening to the greats. I grew up listening to Keith Jackson, like I'm sure you did. Remember very clearly Keith's final kind of big call, the Texas USC Rose Bowl game, and listen back to so many of his calls. I mean, I think a lot of people would enjoy seeing Keith come back and I mean, Notre Dame, Ohio State just has rich history written all over it, right? So you'd want someone, I think, who could be an historian of the game and have a feel for the history of it. So, I mean, I would say Keith, but then he'd pop in there and no one would ever want me back in there. And I think with analysts, it's interesting. I'm tempted to say, well, look, two-man booth is easier to work with, but if you can get a whole bunch of voices from the past in there, what would that be like? What would it be like to have, maybe you have, somebody from either side? It's fascinating. I mean, I don't think always the best players make the best analysts or the greatest coaches make the best analysts. You might agree or disagree. And I'm talking about all sports. So, you've got people like Kirk, who was a really good, solid college player, but had to think his way through, work hard, prepare really hard, and becomes a great analyst. I think that's pretty much the pattern. Joel Klatt at Fox, I could go on and on. You get what I'm saying. It's people that have had to, scrape and claw and use every edge they can, use their instincts and their brain power. I think that's what makes a good analyst, much more than a superstar player. So I'm not going to give you the answer I want, because I want to be there with Kirk. It's our 11th championship game. We have an unspoken chemistry. You'd probably be shocked how little we actually sit and talk about the game before it's played. because his preparation is different than mine. He's all over the place. He's doing Amazon. He's doing game day. He's flying in. We don't sit there and go, okay, now red zone, Notre Dame. What do you like? What's Ohio State do? I mean, I think we respect each other's preparation. We know we're going to be ready for anything, but we don't have a lot of conversations. And there's no way I could do this game with anybody else that way. I mean, if I were to bring in a new analyst, I'd be worried about how are they going to see it? How am I going to set them up? How am I going to get the best out of them? So I'm good with where I am in the booth, and then having Holly Rowe and Holly McGrath on the sidelines this time. So you listen to broadcasts, even great broadcasts that were done back then. It is so different. And I don't know better or worse. It's evolved because the audience is much more informed. I talk about the data I have. They got the same data, most of it anyway. And they hear a lot about the game, and they're prepared. And you have to, I think, elevate the level of information you present in order to match what the customer knows. Because remember, back in the day, you didn't have, the 100 hours of content on a national championship game before you tuned in that night to watch it. And now there's at least that if people want to consume it. So the game, the way we broadcast it is so different. Old time audiences would listen and go, shut the hell up. What's with the stats and all this data and analytics? I don't get these graphics. People probably still say that. But I think that now audiences are sort of used to, because it's the same thing in the NFL and really any sport. And baseball, look at baseball. Look at the data. Look at the information you have on the screen in baseball that you never had. And baseball, I think it was the most old-fashioned, yesteryear type of sport. Look how it's broadcast today. I think CFB is pretty similar.